Nobody cares about you but you. Nobody. Drill this into your head. Someone once said that life is a tragedy for those who feel and a comedy for those who think. What up, Casanova? In this video, I want to talk about how to stop giving up. All right, how to push through your fears, how to embrace discomfort, how to stop caring what people think about you, stop caring about their judgment, and how you can, as a result, improve your success with women and dating, but also just live a life unbound. So this is a two-part guide, and in this video, part one, I'll be discussing some general principles and mindsets to help you get started. Then in part two, I'll be sharing some practical steps for how you can start building this muscle, as well as show you some real life examples. But before we get into it, if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that you're notified when we put out new content. Now, let's shed some light on the matter. How do you stop giving a fuck? It's a tough question, like what does it mean? How do you tackle it? From what angle? I think with questions like that, you have to, start from a more macro perspective, start more philosophically, because that's where a lot of big shifts start to happen, on a higher bird's eye view. First of all, what does life mean to you? How do you see it? Okay. This is a very important pillar of learning not to give a fuck, because the more meaning that you attach to life, the harder it is to live. The more pressure, you put on yourself, the greater the expectations. But if you realize that in some philosophical sense, life is meaningless, maybe there's some greater celestial plan, perhaps. But otherwise, I'd say life is pretty meaningless, and the only meaning it carries is the meaning that you bring to it. It's kind of like a movie that's unfolding before your eyes, and you're directing it, you're shaping it. There are elements outside of your control, and then there are elements more or less within your control. And how you manage those elements within your control is essentially how you end up directing your movie. More than that, I would say try to adopt a more lighthearted and comedic attitude towards life. See the beauty and the humor in its weirdness, in its harshness, in its mysteries, in its tragedies. Someone once said that life is a tragedy for those who feel and a comedy for those who think. So if you adopt a very kind of rational perspective on life, then you'll quickly realize that in the grander scheme of things, it is all pretty funny. All of it. The fact that we have oceans and animals and climates and rich and poor, wars and famine, success, technology, progress.
2 hours later.
Various kinds of hobbies. This entire mating dance. Pretty fucking hilarious, okay? The fact that we're here discussing success with women, personal development. It's all just so absurd, especially when you consider how meaningless it all is. Now, to succeed in life, you still have to play by the universal principles of success. You still have to play by the rules of the game, even if in the grander scheme of things, it's all meaningless. While it's all one big joke, you still have to take the rules that make things work seriously, whether it's success in life, the mating dance, etc. But otherwise, it's all a big ridiculous joke.
Yo, quick announcement, my dude. Just want to briefly mention that over the last year, many guys have been asking me, how do you create chemistry with women? And this has sadly been exaggerated by the pandemic. That's right, I'm talking about that magic you see me create with the girls in my videos. So, I've decided to give away a super entertaining, uncut, infield bonus video showing exactly that. Just click on the link in the description below. By signing up, you're also joining the VIP list for our, wait for it, new course, Honest Chemistry. which will be released in the near future and will teach you everything to do with creating chemistry, from sexual tension to an amazing connection. This course has been more than a year in the making, and I'm really excited to release it. So be sure to click on the link in the description box or comment section below to get access to your bonus video and stay in the loop. All right, now let's get back into it.
Now, secondly, realize that death is coming. It's inevitable. Accept it, embrace it. Truly accept it and embrace it. Thinking about this has gotten me through some very stressful periods in my life, some very scary periods. When I was, transitioning into something new and uncomfortable, when I was starting this channel and I was leaving the corporate world behind, I was terrified. I was terrified of everything, of this new identity, this new lifestyle, judgment, failure, etc., etc. And when I would think about death, I would realize, well, the worst is coming. Maybe I wouldn't even call it the worst, because that's labeling it or judging it. Because death is death. It is what it is. I mean, it's kind of scary, but it's coming. And when you embrace that, you realize that everything that scares us, everything else in life is kind of a manifestation of death. And when we avoid doing those things, the uncomfortable things, the scary things, we're essentially trying to cheat death. This really crystallized for me when I was doing psychedelics. I've been dabbling with psychedelics for a while now. And this really crystallized when I started taking higher doses, and when I did the hero dose, where I felt like I faced my own death. It really hits you that when you avoid doing the things that are important to you, and we'll talk about that later in the video, but when you avoid doing the things that are meaningful and important to you, that are uncomfortable and that scare you, you're essentially trying to cheat death. And it creates this friction, this disconnect, this existential angst inside of you that's just so unpleasant. And I'm sure you've all experienced it. I'm sure you can relate. It's only when you face those things, when you face those fears, embrace them, that you can truly transcend. Now, if you're going to dabble with psychedelics, I encourage it, but do it carefully and responsibly. Do your research, etc., etc. But it can be a very powerful catalyst for having some of these realizations, especially when you start sensing this, when you start realizing this sense of oneness you have with the world. And it kind of sounds woo-woo right now, perhaps, if you haven't dabbled with it. It'll broaden your horizons and expand your mind, and you'll start to understand what I'm talking about. But when you start to feel this sense of oneness in the world, it sheds a lot of light. It gives you a lot of clarity on who you are and what your purpose is, and what is your meaning as a man, and what it is that is important to you in general. But in the interest of not digressing, you essentially realize that death is an extension of life, and life is an extension of death, and it's all kind of interconnected. So how we look at death is going to be reflected in how we see life and how we see the everyday struggles of life, and everything that goes on in the world. So when you truly embrace that death is inevitable, there's really nowhere to run, then you force yourself to face the things that are uncomfortable to you, because you might as well do it now. It'll help you live more meaningfully, as opposed to sweep it all under the rug, suffer in the process, and then guess what? You have to face it all in the end anyway. It's like, imagine having to have a very unpleasant conversation with someone, a very difficult conversation with someone. You know you need to have it. You know you need to, okay? Let's say maybe it's a breakup. You can keep sweeping it under the rug and delaying it, okay? And pretending that it doesn't need to be had. But deep down, you're going to be suffering from a certain cognitive dissonance, okay? You are not going to be in alignment, okay, or in harmony. And again, there's going to be that existential angst that's going to torment you until you have that talk and set yourself free. So that's kind of, a microcosm for death, as are all other important and uncomfortable things in life. So it's very important to adopt that perspective. It's truly, truly liberating. The other thing that you need to realize is that nobody cares about you but you. Nobody cares about you but you, okay? Drill this into your head. Not your friends, not your parents, and certainly not random people that you're gonna be meeting through life, okay? So sure, your parents have some sense of obligation and duty and responsibility for you, and so they worry if you are generally not well. They worry because it affects them. It affects their well-being, okay? Not yours, it affects their well-being. So they want to make sure that you're okay, not necessarily happy, okay, that's a bonus. If you're happy, that's a bonus. But they want to make sure that you're doing something safe, okay, you're not going to starve to death, you're not going to be judged because they might be judged in the process. They want that peace of mind, okay? And of course, they feel for you by extension because you are their kin. So if you're going through some kind of turmoil, generally speaking, they will feel that too. But it's not like they deep down really want you to live your best life. They don't even necessarily understand what that means. And I'm not saying that you need to like blame your parents or resent your parents for something, not at all. Your parents are kind of doing their best and it is what it is and that's life. So don't get cynical about any of this. This is all meant for you to adopt a more optimistic perspective on life, to embrace the reality of things as they are. But okay, your parents care, if they're good parents, to the extent that they care. Although sometimes caring too much can actually be very detrimental because you can suffocate the child, you can pump a lot of fear into them, you can coddle it too much. So that's a whole other conversation. Your friends care somewhat. I mean, your friends and your acquaintances, they don't really have that same kind of moral obligation that your parents do. They might to some extent if it's like an old childhood friend, but overall they care to the extent that they need to care, to the extent that it serves them, to the extent that it aligns with their reality. If you're successful, they might envy you if they're not living purposefully and authentically. If they are living purposefully, then they might be happy for you. If you're not doing too well, they might be like, glad I'm not in his shoes, okay? Or, oh, that's kind of weird. I can't imagine myself doing that. Or if it is something cool, it's like, oh, that's cool and exciting. Or maybe they might resent the fact that they can't do it or they can't do what is important to them. So it can be all kinds of emotions, right? It can really run the gamut of how they might perceive your situation. If you're really not doing well, they might pity you, right? So again, it can really vary, but at the end of the day, they don't really care. They perceive the situation in a certain way, but only insofar as how it reflects on them. I'm not trying to paint some kind of a cynical outlook on the world. I'm not saying don't have friends and acquaintances, like nobody gives a fuck. It's like, yeah, it's cool to have friends and acquaintances and to like, share your experiences with and share your successes with and share your challenges and failures and tribulations with. And the best friendships are obviously the ones that are most authentic, where the other person is pursuing what is meaningful and true to them. When someone is living out of alignment with themselves, then they're going to judge the other person. They're going to resent them, okay? So be careful. They're going to tell them they can't do something, okay? Because they're going to project their own fears onto the situation, okay? They're going to judge them, etc. So the best people to surround yourself with are the ones that are too in alignment with themselves, you know, are living meaningfully and purposefully, pushing through their fears, etc., etc. But ultimately, you're still alone on your course. You're doing you, and if others want to partake in this or join in this or collaborate or share, that's great, that's bonus. But otherwise, you're just doing you. You know, when you're like a kid, you're growing up, maybe up until the end of college, you can't help but have this sense of camaraderie with your friends, and you want to like do things together, be in it together. It's very bonding for men especially, well, for women in their own way, but it's very bonding for men to like do goal-oriented things together, whether it's chasing after girls or doing some kind of a project or going on some kind of a trip, or, you know, maybe building a business, launching some kind of venture. When you're younger, you can't help but want to do things with your friends to kind of like share those trials and tribulations, those fears, have that sense of unity, okay? Share that adventure with them. But what you realize as you get older is that everyone is just, let's say after the age of like 25 or even like late 20s and 30s, you start to realize that everyone's just doing their own thing. Everyone has found their path, okay? Or at least what they think is their path, and they're just kind of on their course and they're doing their own thing and you're doing your own thing. It's kind of scary when you're crossing that threshold of your mid-20s and you start seeing people just go on their own path. Maybe you were going to start a business with your friend, but then, whoa, surprise, he doesn't want to anymore, or he's scared, or he's in this like relationship that's preventing him to do X, Y, Z. Your friend's interests change, your friend's perspectives change, certain fears are not conquered, etc., etc. And so you realize you really must focus on you and make it happen yourself, because that happens to be what you want. Where am I going with this? Where I'm going with this is that when you're afraid of this judgment and what people think and care, you're really shooting yourself in the foot, because no one actually cares. When you're out, you know, in the real world doing some random shit, approaching a girl on the street or at a bar, and you think people care that you're doing that, you know, guys will sometimes worry about like a high pressure situation on the street. They're about to approach a girl. It's like, oh, there's like an old lady standing at the bus stop, and then there's like a guy walking behind her. It's like, ooh, they're gonna like judge me, you know? What are they gonna think? They don't really give a fuck. They're more concerned about their own shit. The guy on the street is concerned about taking his cat to the vet. He's concerned about some fight he had with his mom. He's concerned about some exam that's coming up. He's concerned about a mortgage payment. He's concerned about some date that he has. Seeing you might amuse him for a second. He might be like, oh, that's weird. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's creepy. That's it. He's just gonna walk on by and continue thinking about his own shit. Think about you. You see some guy, I don't know, riding a unicycle in a Speedo in the street. You're gonna be like, oh, cool. Oh, that's weird. Or maybe take a picture, send it to your friend. Okay, and that's it. That guy's still living his life, and you're still living your life. And it doesn't matter. Everyone is too consumed with their own issues, problems, needs, desires. Nobody gives a fuck about you. Unless there's some kind of value exchange happening, nobody cares what you do. And remember, when someone is passing judgment on someone else, they're not really judging that person. They're judging themselves if they were put in that same situation. They're kind of projecting their worldview onto the situation and thinking, wow, like if I was in that situation, I don't know if I'd like that, right? Everyone sees the world through their own lens. Everyone has their own views, values, beliefs, quirks, complexes, neuroses, etc., biases. When you're judging someone, you're not judging them, you're judging yourself. So imagine some guy sees you approaching a girl on the street and thinks to himself, ooh, wow, that's weird. He's chasing after some girl, that's needy or creepy or whatever it is, whatever his worldview is. So that's not about you. That's him imagining himself in that situation and judging himself for it, projecting his worldview onto it. You might have a completely different perspective. You might be operating in a completely different reality. And those two realities, his and yours, do not have to align. This is why it's so important to ignore the haters, because when haters are hating, it has nothing to do with you really. It's them distracting themselves from their own issues, or making sense of their own decisions, or trying to feel better about their own reality. They're coping with their own shit by judging you, okay? By going out of their way to criticize what you're doing, etc., right? It's okay to have an opinion and to have preferences in life, okay? But if you're going out of your way to pass judgment on someone, to criticize them harshly, that says more about you than them. Which brings me to my next point. When you do things that are meaningful to you, nothing else in the world matters. Nothing else. When you do things that make you feel alive and fulfilled, that is the only thing that matters. Nothing else. If some people want to join in and share that with you, that's cool, that's bonus. If some don't, doesn't matter. Okay, but that, you realize, is the only thing that matters. That is what makes life worth living. That brings it the meaning, because guess what? It's your own movie. So figure out what is meaningful to you, what is important to you. Not because someone else wants you to do it, not because it'll save you some kind of judgment or embarrassment, but because it makes you genuinely happy. And don't measure yourself up to some kind of a standard or an expectation. Just figure it out as you go along. Just figure it out. Just do what you intuitively want to do, what you intuitively enjoy, and then figure it out as you go. See how you feel about it. All right, guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and comment, as well as tune in later this week for part 2 of this guide, where I'll be sharing some practical steps and exercises to help you start building this muscle of not giving a fuck, as well as showing you some real life examples. And don't forget to sign up for our Honest Chemistry VIP list so that you can get your free uncut infield bonus video by clicking the link in the description below or in the comments section. Thanks again, and until next time.